Mythology has always fascinated me. Grand tales of gods, heroes, and monsters have captured my imagination over the years, and one of my favorite spins on Greek mythology was the God of War series, which starred the vengeful Spartan Kratos, as he attempted to fight his inner demons and bring down the rule of Olympus. The story of Kratos came to a spectacular conclusion in God of War 3, and I was happy with how the story ended, but some part of me still hoped to see Kratos return and interact with a whole new pantheon. Needless to say, I was thrilled when Kratos made his marvelous return in an all-new game, simply titled God of War. What do I like about Kratos' adventure in Norse mythology? Let's jump in as I share my game reflections for God of War. The setting of this game takes place long after the events of God of War 3. Kratos has left behind everything tied to his past life in Greece, and is now living somewhere far to the north. The game opens with Kratos gathering wood for a funeral pyre for his deceased wife, Faye. Kratos, together with his son Atreus, then set out to fulfill Faye's last wish, to have her ashes spread from the highest peak in all of the realms. It is this journey and the exploration of Kratos and Atreus' relationship that form the real heart of this story. Kratos is much older and wiser than he was in previous chapters of the series, but he still carries much of the anguish from his past. Kratos wants to connect to his son, but sometimes he just doesn't know how, and it's this element of the game's story that really makes this Kratos' most personal story yet. Atreus is an equally brilliant character, often making funny, charming remarks, but he is still a temperamental and sometimes reckless child. Atreus had a stronger relationship with his mother, and seeing his relationship with his father Kratos grow over the course of the adventure is very touching.
There it is!
Hold! What are you doing? Now his guard is up. Only fire. Only fire when I tell you to fire.
I'm sorry.
Do not be sorry. Be better. Find it. Find it.
As amazing as the father-son dynamic is, that's not all there is to the story of God of War. Characters from Norse mythology soon make themselves known, and each new introduction had me on the edge of my seat. There's fun characters like the dwarf brothers Brock and Sindri, who are constantly having a family squabble, and there's the awe-inspiring characters like the World Serpent. God of War keeps the series' tradition of having amazing set pieces and incredible moments, with each one eclipsing the last. Throughout your journey to the various realms, the tale of God of War never ceases to be absolutely riveting. And by the time I reached the end, I could say without any doubt that it is one of the best video game narratives I've ever seen. It's an emotional journey, and one that takes the characters to some unexpected places, and seeing the growth of Kratos and Atreus during their adventure made for a very moving and sensational story.
Stay calm, boy!
I am! This is great!
It speaks?
Yeah! Mom said he's friendly!
What is it saying?
I don't know! That was amazing!
Much like the story, the gameplay of the new God of War has grown and goes in some really fun and engaging directions. Like all the previous games, combat is the focal point of the gameplay experience, and while it may seem very different on the surface, once you start swinging your axe around, it feels just as satisfying, if not more so, than the previous games. Speaking of the axe, Kratos' primary weapon in this game is the Leviathan axe, which was given to him by his wife upon her death. And I have to say, it's an incredible weapon. The impact of each hit, the combo possibilities, and being able to throw it at enemies makes it super fun and very versatile. Undoubtedly, the most impressive aspect of the Leviathan axe is the ability to call it back to Kratos, much like Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. It makes a satisfying thwump each time, and it never got old. Kratos doesn't just rely on his axe, he can also defend himself with the Guardian Shield and pummel opponents with his fists. Dodging and blocking attacks is crucial to survival, and later on you can acquire skills to reflect attacks back at opponents with the shield. Having Kratos punch his opponents is actually more effective on certain enemies, and with each blow you land you'll build up the stun meter on that opponent. Once this meter is filled, Kratos can perform a brutal finishing move just like the older games, and these finishers are just as vicious as ever. There's also the Rage of Sparta, which is activated once Kratos dishes out enough damage, and the orange rage meter is filled. Fueled by the rage that can bring down titans, Kratos is practically invincible and performs a flurry of punches that quickly takes down even the most powerful of beasts. All of Kratos' abilities combined make for quite the combat system, and it only gets better as you progress. Not to be left out, Atreus can also help in combat by shooting enemies with his bow and arrow. Firing at enemies is as simple as pushing a button, and strategic use of Atreus' arrows can quickly stun some enemies or divert attention away from Kratos. It doesn't do too much damage, but later on in the game you can improve Atreus' skills with the bow and allow him to do even more damage to enemies. Skill attacks, or runic attacks as they're called here, are powerful abilities Kratos can use, but once you use them, they have to recharge before he can perform them again. There are quite a few runic attacks to obtain, and all of them are fun to use and experiment with. In addition to the combat, there is also the occasional puzzle, most of which revolve around finding and reading certain runes. They are never head-scratchers, but they are a nice break from the action, and the rewards you receive for completing them can lead to more health and treasure, which can be used to upgrade weapons and armor. Yes, this game is sporting some light RPG mechanics, and they actually gel really well with the series. Kratos now gains experience for every battle, which can be used to unlock new moves for himself and Atreus, but in order to access these new moves, you have to upgrade your weapon first. By visiting Brock and Sindri's various shops, you can craft and upgrade a plethora of things, like axe pommels, quivers, gauntlets, and so on. It starts out simple enough, but once you reach the halfway point of the game, there is tons of different equipment pieces to unlock. For myself, I tended to stick with the armor pieces that looked best on Kratos, and I just upgraded them from there, but there are loads of different combinations to try and lots of stats to fiddle around with. It's nothing too intimidating, and it adds an extra layer to the game's mechanics. Also new to God of War is an expansive world to explore. What I like most about this is that it isn't really an open world game. I would actually say it bears more similarities to a Metroidvania. At many points throughout your adventure, you'll see objects you can't interact with until you progress further in the story. It's great fun returning to an area you previously couldn't reach and discovering all sorts of thrilling side activities like optional dungeons and challenging gauntlets. The main story of God of War takes around 12 hours to complete, but that time is doubled if you seek out all the optional content. There is so much to experience in this game, but it never once became a grind, and it is extremely fun from start to finish. One of the things that is immediately apparent when you start God of War is just how gorgeous of a game it is. There have been plenty of visually spectacular games over the years, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that God of War is one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen. Creatures like the World Serpent are just eye-popping, and even small details like the characters leaving tracks in the snow are simply amazing. Arguably the most impressive feat of God of War's design is that the camera never cuts away. From the moment you begin your adventure, the game is one continuous shot, and this adds so much intensity and intimacy to the game as a whole. Even in the most hectic of battles, this camera system is never obstructive and complements all of Kratos' abilities beautifully. I do love the fixed camera angles of past games, but this new camera dynamic is truly impressive and super immersive. The music of God of War has quite a different flair from Kratos' other adventures, but it ranks up there with some of the best soundtracks in the franchise. Bear McCreary has done amazing work with his compositions for this game. The music is haunting, epic, and captivating. The music in this game definitely suits the Norse setting like a glove, but if I had to pick out a few of my personal favorite tracks, it would be the main theme for its powerful male choruses, Ashes for its ethereal, beautiful vocals, and Deliverance for being a stupendous boss battle theme. This game's music is nothing short of magnificent, and if the game receives a follow-up, I hope McCreary will return as the composer. If it wasn't already obvious, I absolutely loved my time with God of War. The Return of Kratos is not only an excellent exclusive title, but a game that stands tall as a prime example of why video games can be so amazing. The narrative, gameplay, visuals, and music all come together to create one of the finest games I've ever played. God of War is about as close to a perfect game as you can get, and it is not to be missed. thank you for watching this episode of Game Reflections. What are your thoughts on God of War? Any other games you would like me to take a look at? Feel free to share in the comments below. This is Cosmic Castaway, and until next time, keep having great adventures, everyone.
Have you seen my brother again?
Yeah, he said you lost your talent.
Oh, and that I'm selfish? No. I'm sure. That I value a weapon's look? No. Over its purpose? That I'm pretentious? No. And uptight? Fussy? I know what he thinks, but he can't hurt me any— Ah! Burn that.